do want to get to fingerprinting. Yes. Will we see an end to fingerprinting, Alex? And if so, what steps can advertisers take to ensure their app doesn't get rejected?
I think this is a really interesting question, because if you'd asked me 48 hours ago, it would be a different answer.
Yeah.
One of the big questions for the last year is, since the app tracking transparency policy contains both the technical limitations on IDFA, which I think is what pretty much everyone has focused on for most of the last year, but also contains the policy limitations on anything that could be an IDFA alternative, which in this case, we're talking about fingerprinting, which didn't really become the widespread understanding until probably January of this year. And we still see companies, including MMPs, trying to spin it in a way that means that's still possible. The shoe that needs to drop is Apple going into the app and dynamically assessing whether fingerprinting is taking place, and then actually following through on this policy that says it's not allowed. It's been a little bit confusing that Apple has done nothing so far. One theory was that apps, just since the iOS 14.5 adoption rate is so low, they wanted to wait a little bit. Maybe they're giving people their idea of a grace period to adapt, which nobody's actually using as a grace period. They're just maintaining the status quo. The other theory, which now that we've been through WWDC, I think is a lot more credible, is that perhaps Apple just doesn't even need to enforce this. Mm-hmm. And there was really only one nuclear option they could use to get there, which they rolled out on Monday, which is this idea of basically a global VPN that makes fingerprinting technically impossible to do. And that's what they announced on Monday. So maybe we'll see some policy crackdowns in the meantime, or maybe just things stop working and Apple says, well, you shouldn't have been doing them in the first place. We told you that a year ago. Mm-hmm. And fingerprinting just goes away without Apple ever having to make a big deal about it.
Sounds unclear. What do you?
My one question on the nuclear option is, why did they only make it available to paid users? I find this interesting because they say that privacy comes as standard, but then you have to pay a premium to get privacy. I find that strange from Apple. It doesn't seem to fit with their approach. I get it because they're operating effectively a VPN, which has a cost. But this is a strategic initiative for them. So I'm curious, how do you think that it's going to roll out over the next, say, year or so?
I would say the specifics of what they've announced this week are less important than the signal they sent by announcing it. So yes, today, what they've announced is for paid subscribers. And technically, it actually won't break a lot of the MMP fingerprinting immediately because it's only for web traffic today. But if we look at historical precedent from what Apple rolls out, they often test something like this on the website 6 to 12 months before they roll out something very similar on the app side. We've seen that multiple times. And they've already also set a precedent here that even though the full VPN experience requires a subscription, of which they have almost 1 billion at this point, so it's going to be the majority of users no matter what, they are still going to leverage the same infrastructure for specific things for all users. That's how they're doing this mail pixel blocking, for example. They're using the private relay infrastructure for all iOS users, regardless of subscription status. They're doing the same thing to block their idea of trackers via ITP. They're just detecting the trackers and splitting out that traffic to go via the VPN instead of normal thing. It would not surprise me at all if they do something similar in other areas as we go forward.